back on air.
It's time for some more unadulterated Ashes nostalgia. For those of you who like that kind of thing. This is episode 11 of Once Upon a Time in the Ashes, and you are all very welcome to hear our latest tales of daring do on the sunlit uplands of England and Australia. After successfully hunting down Ross Duncan, Ken Eastwood and Tony Dell in the 1970-71 series in Australia, we have to time travel to 1977, a galaxy far, far away from the early 1970s, to find our next pair of One Ashes Jedi Knights. And what a year it was, starting with the Force for Good, there was the Centenary Test at the MCG, and ending with the Rebel Alliance of World Series cricket. Or should that be A New Hope? Next time around, we'll hear from Mick Malone of Scarborough, Western Australia. He was selected for the fifth and final test of the series at the Oval.
Conditions were good. I swung the ball about quite a bit. I think I'd bowled something like 20 overs before I took a wicket. And at that point, by about the 18th or 19th over, I thought, well, I'm going to get taken off shortly. I've had a test match. I haven't got a wicket. Didn't even think about getting a run. What an experience. And I did feel I'm out of my depth here. These fellas are just too good. I'm not going to get a wicket. And all of a sudden, bang, something happens. I get a wicket. And then another, and then another. Greg Chappell just had confidence in me and just left me on. Every time someone nicked it, someone caught it. It was fantastic.
But before we listen to Mick's take on the summer of 77, it's time to focus our attention on Graham Barlow of Middlesex. Of course, all our One Ashes Test wonders have been at the mercy of the selectors and the captain, and we've heard countless tales already about how communication isn't always what it could be. And it seems not even the best are immune. Take this extract from Mike Brearley's The Art of Captaincy. I remember that we decided to leave Graham Barlow out 40 minutes before the start of the second test in 1977. The players were practicing fielding at that moment, so I asked for the team not to be announced until the session had finished. Unfortunately, this instruction was ignored, and Barlow's suspense was ended by the public address system. What say we get Graham out into the middle to hear his side of the story? Graham Barlow was an attacking left-handed batsman, outstanding fielder and integral part of the successful Middlesex side in the 70s and early 80s. He played 251 first-class games between 1969 and 1986, scoring 12,387 runs at an average of 35.9 with 26 centuries. He played 6 one-day internationals and 3 tests for England, including his one Ashes test at Lord's in 1977. Graham, welcome to Once Upon a Time in the Ashes.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, and really surprised to find you out in Australia. How did that come about?
A long story. I left England in 86 and moved to South Africa. I was then married to a South African and stayed in South Africa for 14 years. Then marriage broke up there, and I then moved to New Zealand, having met my future wife in South Africa. The reason we left South Africa was because Rose was pregnant. We had Tara there, and then we moved. We spent 20 years in New Zealand. We were going to use it as a launching pad for coming to Australia, but I got involved cricket-wise with Central Districts after I'd been in New Zealand for a couple of years, and I coached them for 5 years, by which time we were fairly ensconced in New Zealand. So, I think I was mid-50s, late 50s maybe when I finished that. So then I went back into teaching in Whangarei, which is north of Auckland. And I taught 5 years at Whangarei Boys High, and then went across the road to Whangarei Girls High, teaching English for my sins there. Bit of a change. I needed something to get my brain into gear after basically a lifetime of cricket. Not that I wanted to get out of it, but you need a change at some stage. And they were challenges which I really enjoyed. So that brings me to here. So we've been here for 18 months. And the draw for us was my younger sister, who was in Melbourne, moved up here. And we had a couple of Christmases up here in Noosa in terms of somewhere to retire, it's an absolutely lovely place. It really is. It's got everything that that you want, and it's basically pretty warm most of the time.
Well, we'll get into the cricket in a minute, but that's pretty much as soon as you finished your cricket that you left England then. So you haven't really been back since then.
We spent 3 months. I was coaching at Haileybury, just outside London. It's a public school. So 98 was the last time I was back in England. So it's been quite a long time.
Like many of the players I've spoken to on this series, including the first one, Keith Slater and Ken Taylor, they were all-round sportsmen. They played football and cricket. They played rugby, whatever it might be. In your case, it was cricket and rugby. Which sport did you prefer, and how did you get into both of those sports?
The cricket started when I was 13. I never picked up a bat until I was 13. My dad, he'd been a mechanic in Romney, and then he got dermatitis. Anyway, we moved. We left Romney, which is right on the coast in Kent, and moved to Stockwell, which was not the best part of London at that stage.
No.
And we lived in a tenement flat. And my dad drove a London bus for a while. Cut a long story short, he got an offer from a friend of his who ran the pool of chauffeurs at Iliff Press. So my dad just worked in a pool. And then, again, by chance, one of the young executives that he drove around was a man named Don Ryder. They got on very well. And Don Ryder left after my dad had been there about a year. And he became the MD of the Miller Group. And so when he got the job, he said to my dad, look, I want you to come with me. I want you to be my chauffeur. He said, and I want you to live in Ealing, which at that stage was, we were in Stockwell. It was a big difference. So my dad said, well, look, we can't afford to live there. It's like, he said, no, don't worry. I'll get the mortgage and that. I need you to live near to me because I get up at 5 and I want to be at work by 6 and I'm often at late nights. So he basically instigated the mortgage. I mean, my dad still had to pay, but obviously he was paying Dad, so it worked out. And he really looked after my dad. My dad worked in for 20 odd years, I think. I did end up going to a London County Council boarding school in Wolverstone called Wolverstone Hall, which actually was a very good school, but I didn't enjoy being away from home much. But that's where I got my first taste of cricket. They had a coach named Dickie Mays who had played for Suffolk, I think, and they had a good cricket grounds and thatch pavilion. It was really good. So that was my first taste. But that was really where I was taught my basic rugby. A guy named Guy Evans, every time he did something wrong, he'd give you a clout round the ear. So you sort of pick things up pretty bloody quickly. Otherwise, So that's the beginning of the two sports, really. When I got back to Ealing, I went to Ealing Grammar School. Don't know how I got in there. Very, very good school. I was in the lowest stream all the way through. They were a soccer school that also played cricket, and they did have a rugby team. So I started playing for the rugby team, coincided with having a few decent players and did quite well. And the cricket-wise, two friends of mine, Eddie Pratt and Andy Davis, lived 100 yards down the road from where we lived in Ealing. And they were going to the same school. So I said to them, well, where do you play cricket? So they no, we go down to Great Western Railway, a little club, So I played in their second team, I think, at 13 and 14. And sort of midway through the 14 year, I played in their first team. And then we played a game against the local rivals, Brentham, who were a much better time and a much bigger club than ours. And they had an opening bowler named Brian Reid, who became a very, very good friend of mine, was on my benefit committee. Anyway, he came up to me after the game and said, look, if you want to get on in the game, why don't you come down to Brentham? We play in the Middlesex League. Their fixture list was much better, played all over North London. And then playing for Middlesex schools, I was upgraded to Middlesex Young Amateurs. I don't think they exist anymore, but they were a mixture of what I call jazzats, public school boys, and the rest of us who sort of, hung on their shirt tails, but actually worked out really well. So by the time I played a season for them, Middlesex was showing a bit of interest. And that's why I signed, as soon as I finished at school, which was when I was 18, I signed to play I signed my first contract for 2 years, I think, for £350 a year.
Yeah. So if your dad hadn't got that chauffeur job, then, I mean, your talent may have come through at another school, but there wouldn't have been the same opportunities, maybe.
No. I personally think that it's a crucial turning point for the family, not just for me.
That takes us up to Middlesex. You made your debut, first-class debut, 1969.
Yeah.
You were, 19 then? So you're very young, weren't you?
Yes. Yeah. I think it was my second game. I'm not sure. It was against Lancashire. The thing I remember about the Lancashire game was that it was difficult to see the wicket from the square. We played at Lord's. It was 3 days of very ordinary weather. It was green as buggery, and they had Shuttleworth, Peter Lever and Ken Higgs. And it was a very low-scoring match. I got the highest score. I mean, I didn't even get to 20, but I got the highest score. That was all I remember. I think I got bowled out in the last over of the day. I played on. I left. I went to leave it. And it bounced and hit my glove and dropped down and rolled onto the stumps. So we lost. So I can remember being quite upset about that. But that was my first memory of first-class cricket. The year before, I spent quite a lot of time being 12th man because I was a bloody good fielder. So I travelled with the team a lot. The people that made a difference for me, Parth was brilliant. You know, Parth was the captain then. And he was the one who actually got me to stop playing cricket and to go to Loughborough in my second year. Because I realised 2 years of playing second team cricket, I wasn't quite as good as I thought I was. And he said, you know, why don't you go get yourself a qualification, get something behind you, and then you can always come back, and then you've got the choice. You haven't got to worry. Similarly, I then established quite a close relationship with Fred Titmuss, who wasn't everybody's character cup of tea. He didn't suffer fools gladly, but geez, he was a bloody good cricketer. And the bit of the joke particularly in my second year with Middlesex, was that I got the short straw, according to the rest of the team, of having to travel with Titmuss in his car. And they all took piss out of me a bit, you know. No one else wanted to travel with him because he didn't stop talking, you know. Yeah. And for me, it was the direct opposite. You know, having a blow-by-blow every match account of the MCC tour to the West Indies when he got his toes cut off, he got sobered out twice. All of that stuff, I just lapped that up.
But then your cricketing career was put on hold for a while, wasn't it? What happened next?
What happened was, after those 2 years, I decided to go to Loughborough. That's where my rugby really took off.
So the rugby was overtaking cricket at that point, was it?
Well, I could only get a part-time contract from the time I finished at Loughborough at the end of June. I missed a lot of the season anyway. And the other thing was that I didn't have a lot of money, and that part-time contract helped me pay for being at Loughborough. I was a little bit torn then. And we had a coach named Jim Greenwood, who was, if you do a bit of homework on Clive Woodward, you'll find out that Jim was Clive's hero. He was at Loughborough at the same time as me. And a lot of his coaching, his interest in coaching and coaching ability came from Jim Greenwood. That rugby team, the 73 team, was a really good side. I think we had about 6 internationals, Scottish, Welsh and English. Fran Cotton, Steve Smith.
Did the rugby help with your fielding, or was that something you just worked a lot at?
Don't ask me where I get hand-eye coordination. I was quick. I had pace. I didn't really know that until I went to Loughborough. We had a bloke named Robbie Brightwell. He got maybe a silver. Anne Packer was his wife. She won a gold.
Okay.
He was our athletics lecturer. So when we did the 100 metres, 200 and 400, you know, I realised, okay. Yeah, and also a determination I wanted to be as good as anybody on the cricket field, particularly fielding. Colin Bland was quite a big influence. Every time he threw at the stumps, he hit them about 8 out of 10 from anywhere, you know.
Well, let's move on to 1976, because that was an excellent season for you.
Yeah.
You were the leading run scorer for Middlesex, played a huge part in you winning the county championship that year, which is the first time since 1949.
Oh, magic, yeah. When I look back now, I was very inexperienced then. I'd played a couple of games in 74, and then 75 I played in some one-dayers and championship matches. And actually, I should never have played in 1976 because Middlesex had signed Larry Gomes to bat at 3. And then just before the season started, just after we'd done pre-season, Gomesy got picked for the West Indies team touring. So there was a hole there. We went to Germany for a pre-season trip. It was bloody freezing, and we played on the mat. But actually, as a team, funnily enough, in those days, we didn't do team building. You know, we didn't do, looking after your mates. We didn't do any of that. It was a bit of a change because Breers was in charge. He wanted to encourage a bit of team spirit. Magic year.
Everything was going right, wasn't it? Middlesex winning the county championship, but then you were called up for England for the first time in that one-day series against the West Indies, weren't you? And
that's right.
Started rather spectacularly for you.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Yeah. I suppose it was a bit of a highlight. It was sort of downhill from there on, you know.
Don't know about that.
I think not as a player, but certainly from an international point of view, you know.
But how did that feel to play international cricket for the first time?
The experience for that first game, it was really unusual because it was at Scarborough and it was packed. I mean, It felt like there were about 30,000, but I think there was about 12. There was a lot of noise, and I mean, I think it was Bosworth game and John Lever. Yeah, and I thought, obviously, I was a little bit worried about their bowling attack because they had Michael and Andy. I hadn't really, even that season, I think Keith Boyce for Essex bowled really quick. But otherwise, I hadn't really experienced what you'd call express pace. So I was a little bit worried. But then I was batting at 5. They put me at 5 and I thought, well, I'm home and dry here. That's great. Because I knew Scarborough was not a quick wicket. So I thought, oh, good, I'll avoid the new ball, right? And I think it was 20 minutes. And I was walking to the crease and we were 15 for 3, So, yeah, it was quite frightening, actually.
Yeah, I bet.
It really was. It wasn't something that I had to deal with for. Quite an experience, yeah.
Baptism of fire, isn't it, for your first match?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, you mentioned Botham, so that was his first match as well. What do you remember about him in those early days? Was it obvious he was going to go on to be a big star, or was he just part of the team at that point?
Yeah. Well, I got to know, while I was at Middlesex, Both was on the MCC ground staff for a while. So we saw quite a lot of each other. What sticks out with me is he had a lot more confidence than everybody else. Whenever you talk to him, he always gave you the impression, that you got to be careful because I'm going to get you out. He had that absolute belief in his own ability, which of course showed in his career. I mean, the longer he played, the better he got, basically. Very, very impressive.
Tony Gregg was your captain. What was he like to play for?
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Yeah. Greggy had the ability to make you feel you were a good player and make us feel we were a good team. When we were in India, I tell you, he was exceptional. Our performance there, when you look back, was unbelievable, to win the series 3-1. But he was brilliant. With the second test match, he was as sick as a dog. He batted for a day and a half. Sheer guts, sheer guts and determination. And he was like that. And when things got tough, he would just say, give me the ball. He could bowl anything. He'd run up and bowl bounce. He'd run up and bowl swing. He'd bowl off spinners, he slipped the odd leggy in. He had that, what I would call charisma about him. Yeah, he was a good man too, really good man.
You mentioned India there. You played those 3 one-day internationals against the West Indies, obviously scored that brilliant 80 not out in the first one. Did you then expect to be picked for that India tour, or was that in the balance?
No, I had no idea. No, I didn't expect to go on the tour.
And again, challenging conditions. You've started off playing against the West Indian quicks, and then suddenly you're playing on Indian wickets, turning wickets. I mean, how was that? Difficult?
Yeah, that I had a pretty good record against spinners. I wanted to dominate spin. I mean, they had 3 of them, but I mean, I never got the opportunity to show that. I got ill the first week when we went to Pune, and then I played in Jaipur and Ahmedabad, and I got hundreds in both games, only batted once, and played really well. Then I got quite badly sick. From Ahmedabad, we went back to Delhi. They left me in Delhi while they went to play Central Zone or somewhere else. I didn't play in that game, and I was actually in bed for a week. But there was about a 12-day window between that and the first test. So by the time I got out of that hospital, I was all right. That's no excuse. And that test was in Delhi. I got caught bat pad. I was never caught bat pad before that or after that to any spinners, but just one of those things, The second test, I got runs in, might have been Guwahati. Guwahati was a good one. It was just in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
In India in those days, they would either fly you or drive you or train you to the farthest place in the country. And it's a very big country to play your 3-day game. Anyway, we went to Guwahati. They dropped us at an airport somewhere, and then we drove in a coach for hours. And we got to this place, and it was like, we could see it in the distance. It was like a pimple on the hill. We stayed in a really basic hotel. Once we got there, we weren't going to have a net or anything because there weren't the facilities. So we decided to walk down to the ground. And it was about 500 yards down to the ground from the hotel we were staying at. And we got to the ground there. I thought, oh, bloody hell. And it was just a dirt outfield with an embankment and one big shed on the right. And that was where you changed. That was the pavilion. So we thought, oh God. And the place was deserted. It was a colourful, had lots of trees that were budding and flowers and everything. It was lovely looking. So the next morning when we got up, we went to breakfast, and Kenny Barrington came in and said, right, boys, once you've got your gear ready, we're going to get on the bus. So I said, well, what are we going to bus for? It's only 500 metres down the road. He said, no, we've got to get on the bus. Oh, okay. So we got to get, and we go outside, and you cannot move for people. Where they came from, it took us 40 minutes to get from the hotel to the ground. I don't know how many there were. There were at least 15,000 people there. And the other thing was that it might have been a rope around the ground before the embankment started. But once every day finished, then the crowd were beholden to come on to touch you. And when it was about 15,000, it was pretty, and I can remember clear as a bell. Bob Willis saw them all flooding onto the pitch. He bowled the last over and he dashed to the stumps, picked up a stump, and he said, "Follow me, boys." He rushed off waving the stump in front of him, and we were all behind him. It was quite incredible.
And then your next cricketing stop?
The next stop was Sri Lanka.
Oh, and Sri Lanka as well, wasn't there, after India? Yes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So we had 3 months in India and then 3.5 weeks in Sri Lanka.
But then you scored 100 in that match, didn't you?
Yeah, it was very much I had something to prove. I mean, I love the tour in India, but it becomes a bit hard work being 12th man or doing the cooking when you're up country. When we got to Sri Lanka, because it was their first official test, it was only a 4-day test, I think. So I thought, well, I've got to cash in here. I batted for over 7 hours for 100, and my goal was just to get 3 figures. That was, at least it gave me a real chance of playing in Melbourne.
Yes, I'm sure all eyes were on Melbourne and that Centenary Test, so it was time to say goodbye to Sri Lanka and say hello to Australia.
And then we went to Perth. You could not have gone anywhere more different. I can remember waking up there in Perth. We got there in the middle of the night, wake up in the morning, I drew the curtains and I thought, my God, I'm back in the land of the living. There was the Swan River running crystal blue and the streets were absolutely spotless, and I thought, my God, the difference. And then, of course, the wickets. We played at the Wacker, which at that point was definitely the quickest wicket in the world, against Lillee, Wayne Clark, and I think Mick Malone. I tell you what, that wasn't a bad attack. Oh, and they had a leg spinner, got me out, Tony Mann. So hugely different. In those days, I mean, people don't realise, at the Wacker, the sight screens were inside the ground. So they were about 40 yards wide. So they pretty well covered the most of the square. So they had these big wheels either side. And Lillee, when he opened the bowling, he used to kickstart off one of the wheels and then run in this long semicircle till he got to the wicket. And it took ages. So by the time he got there, you were absolutely quaking. It was like, that was quite an experience, I can tell you.
But you were certainly up for the challenge, weren't you?
I got in against a second new ball. I thought I was safe batting at 6. And of course I didn't. We got runs and we played quite well. And we're 4 down. I remember when I got in. And he took the new ball after I hadn't faced the ball. And the first delivery I played half forward to, and it whistled past my cap. And Marshy took it up, jumped up high in the air and said, "For goodness sake, Den," or words to that effect, "don't bowl them at him," and threw it to gully. And I thought, oh my God, this is what you're going to get.
Do you value that knock against Western Australia quite highly? Because as you said, fastest track in the world against Dennis Lillee. I know it wasn't 100, but 60 on that ground was superb.
Yeah. Well, yes, it was. Actually, it was so different. It was the first time I'd encountered the idea what I didn't have to move my feet that much to be able to hit through the line. But that was just the wicket. You could never play a forward defensive like you played in England. You'd have, 3 feet between front foot and back foot. You watch the Aussie players. I mean, even now, they limit their movement. They don't commit themselves. But that's something quite hard to get used to, because when the ball swings in England, I always felt that I needed to be half forward anyway. So, yeah, that was a bit of an experience. Yeah, so, yeah, very enjoyable, yeah.
So you must have been feeling good after that warm-up match in Perth, and it was full steam ahead to Melbourne. What happened next from your perspective?
Well, I was told I was going to play in the Test match before we left Perth.
Were you? What happened?
Well, they decided to change the order. Dennis Amos was our best player by a mile in record and in performance in India, and he was in really good nick, done well. So, but Lillee had a great record against him. So the thinking was, okay, why don't we move Dennis down to 4, which meant that Breers had to have another opening bat. So I would have batted at 6 if I'd played. So that shuffled me out, and they brought in Bob Warmer to open. Good old Bob, much though I love him. You know, he got gloved after about 15 minutes and didn't take any further part in the game. He had a broken finger. Yeah. So then I had to field for 2.5 days, you know, which I didn't mind, which I loved, actually. It was great. Packed house. Being part of a game, you know, which was a Centenary Test, was I wanted to do the best that I could, you know, even though I wasn't playing. Yeah, so it was very enjoyable, good. And the crowd give you a lot of uphill as well. But, you know, most of the banter was quite good-natured. We got to know the bloke that runs they've got a cell underneath one of the dressing rooms for the real outrageous, you know, the blokes who get absolutely tanked up, the locals, and then, you know, start abusing and stuff. And the one guy who ran it he didn't take any nonsense, you know, he went in if there was a problem. He just made sure that they saw the truncheon, you know. Yeah, so little things like that come back.
Is there anything else that sticks in your mind from your time out in Australia?
The thing I remember a lot about that was, 1, having a car accident, 2, rooming with Derek Randall. So Arks was a different character. And in fact, we both went back to Australia to pro. He went to pro for Paran in Melbourne, and I pro for St Kilda. And so we spent a bit of time together. And he's a great bloke, but you never quite knew what to expect from him. When we got back to England and we played Notts, he said, come round to my place, we have a drink, you have supper, you know, so. And I got round to his place, and he opened the door, and he had his pads on. And he sat down at dinner with his pads on the whole time. He's that type of guy, you know, but he was great value. He could see the funny side of anything. You know, someone tipping his hat at Dennis when Dennis was really giving him some verbal, going, "Oh, sorry, Mr. Lilly," he said. And so, I mean, you know, absolutely unique. But I mean, again, that innings was an absolute blinder, one of the best that I've seen. It wasn't an easy wicket. It didn't have a lot of pace in it. And it was a bit uneven, and it got worse. I mean, scores reflect that. To score 170 against that attack, exceptional. Yeah, brilliant. Absolutely exceptional.
But let's rewind a second. You mentioned a car crash. What happened there?
Well, yeah, it wasn't exactly a car crash, but it was enough for the management team to take the car keys off me. We were given brand new Triumph 2.5 automatics to drive. So the keys went on the table. And once I knew I wasn't playing, I made sure I got hold of the bloody keys. You know? We were on our way out. I think it's close to Flinders Street, but you go along Flinders Street and then you're allowed to do a right turn across the tram lines, as there was a queue waiting on the left. So the tram line was on the right and we were going to turn right. So I waited and waited, and eventually the car started to move, but it was very slow. And trams were coming the way we were going and coming the other way on the other side of the road. So I still think about, God, you know, how did this happen? Anyway, I waited and turned half right, and then the car in front of me stopped to let the tram coming the other way. By which time, when I looked right, there was a tram coming my way, you know, coming the way that I was facing. And I thought, oh, well, he's going to stop. Well, he put his brakes on a long way away. But those trams, I'll tell you what, they are huge and they're very heavy. He slowed right down and down and down. And we sat there, you know, thinking, he's got to stop. He's got to stop. He must be stopping. And just before he stopped, he went boom into the front offside part of the bonnet. So it wasn't a major, but I obviously got a lot of stick, you know, and like quite enjoyable moments once you've got over the fact you haven't done any damage and, you know, no one's been hurt, you know.
I imagine there's a lot of dinners and hospitality around that game as well. Was it all a good fun off the pitch?
Yeah, I mean, there was a hell of a lot going on. I wish I was more obsessed with the game than I was with the occasion. But, you know, shaking hands with Bradman and meeting all of those legendary Australian and English players, you know, people that I'd never met before. It's magic. The time there was very well structured. The Aussies had organised the whole event really well, you know. Yeah, so it's the first time I met the Queen as well. And I met her again at Lord's, but there you go. But so it was quite an occasion. She drove around the outfield in the Bentley or the Rolls, whatever it was, you know. It was it was a massive occasion.
Then you've got World Series cricket looming as well. So what I'd like to know is, what did you know of it at that kind of point when you were in Australia and that kind of time coming back to England?
Okay. I had a little in there through Bob Willis. We stayed on after the tour finished. And I stayed on for a week because John Lever and I had to fly to Joburg to play in a double wicket competition. I don't know how I got into that, but, I said, yeah, trip to Africa. Yeah, great. Yeah, I'll go, And so Bob and I stayed with Anne and Arthur Jackson. Now, Arthur was a sports remedial hypnotherapist who was very friendly with Bob and had actually given Bob some tapes to listen to sort of program himself. He did the same for me a couple of times. I didn't really have a lot of time there. We stayed with them. And on the Sunday, they invited a few people around. Greggy had stayed on, and he was one of them. And there was a bloke, I don't think it wasn't Kerry Packer, but it was someone representing Kerry Packer who came for the barbecue. And they basically spoke about World Series cricket. This was about to happen and so. And to be honest, I thought, blimey, this is a bit pie in the sky. At that stage, I was quite naive. I'm not sure how Bob felt about it either, but we were aware of it, but we thought, well, how it will take off, we're not sure. And then all of a sudden, by the time I got back to England from Joburg, it had broken in the press, so.
So no direct approach was made to you at any point, or any of the other Middlesex players?
No, not at that stage, no.
Would you have liked to have played in it? Would you have played in it if asked?
Oh, that's a very difficult question to answer, actually. I'm not sure that I would have. Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know. I might have done. Yeah. Okay, if it had been huge amounts of money, maybe I would have done, but I don't know. Difficult to say.
Did you expect your Middlesex captain to be England captain by the time the Ashes came around when you were in Australia?
Well, actually, I think that might have been mentioned at the time, and it was never official, but Greggy intimated that once this breaks, then it could be the last time I'm officially involved with our test team. And I think automatically we assumed from that the success that Middlesex had and, in terms of captaincy, he had a reputation for being able to handle the different personalities quite well, although I'm not sure he ever quite got it right with Philip Edmonds. But apart from Phil, a lot of people spoke about, they mentioned Both being hard to handle, because he could do his own thing. But that was never the case with Briers. I think they always had a lot of respect for each other, and they were, upfront and open, and that worked very well.
Aside from all that, it's an Ashes summer on your return to England. So are you really focused at that point in getting into that test side and playing a few more test matches?
Actually, that was quite a bad time for me. I was quite ill when I got home. Around about August, I was diagnosed with I'd been carrying glandular fever for a while. But having said that, I didn't feel like I had that. I just didn't feel great. If I'm really honest, I should never have played in that first test match. I can't remember. I didn't get any runs in any competition until Middlesex played the Aussies, I think.
I noticed you got 54 for the MCC.
50. Yeah, that's it. That's the only score that I got. But I never felt like I was really well, on top of it. But after that, the season sort of went downhill a little bit. And I think probably psychologically, I thought my opportunity had probably gone. The season before had sort of buoyed me up a lot. Yeah, it seemed to be in the dim and distant past, for the rest of that season. So
still a big moment to be selected, though. You must have been proud to be selected for an Ashes test.
Well, I was at home. Yeah, absolutely. Having played, I played 2 tests in India. They made me open in the second one there because Kenny was well aware that I was quite nervous sitting around waiting purely because it was a test match. But I think in hindsight, I think I probably felt a lot of the time that I wasn't quite sure whether I was where I should be. I wasn't quite sure whether I was quite good enough, even though I'd had a really good season. And I think certainly that was the case the next year.
Did you think you should have been given another test after that first one? I know you didn't score many runs, but do you think once you're in the team, you should be given a bit of a run to see what you can do?
Well, I scored 1 and 5, didn't I? I think. I don't think so. I was a bit surprised when I was left out because I didn't find out until the public address announced it while we were warming up at Old Trafford. I hadn't been told. But, that's those sort of things happen, etc. So, but no, I didn't have that conscious feeling, that I should still be in the team. I didn't think anyone had their rights on it. But I suppose in looking in hindsight, maybe giving me a run there, I don't know.
It was another successful season for Middlesex, though, wasn't it? You won the county championship again, shared with Kent, and you won the Gillette Cup as well that season.
Yeah, we were a very good side, and we continued to be a very good side. We managed to stay at the top really for quite a long period of time, and probably a lot of that's probably due to Michael Brearley. He was very analytical, very, very good reader of a game, and very formal. He wasn't a laugh-a-minute individual, and he would pick one or two players to run things by. He used Clive Bradley quite a lot when he was playing for Middlesex. Yeah, and not so much Mike Smith, and they were both sort of the same type of era.
We've all heard a lot about Brearley and how he manages both them and other players. Were there any kind of classic Brearley moments where you thought, that really shines a light on his captaincy or the kind of guy he is?
Well, I think the day that we beat Surrey in a day, the game, it had rained for 2 days, I think. And when he walked in the morning, he already had it in his mind. We all thought, well, easy day, 1 day to go. There'll probably be a split the batting or something. There was no conscious thought about getting points out of the game. Yeah, he came in the morning, he said, look, we're going to try and set up a win here. And everybody went quiet, oh, okay. and he was spot on because the wicket obviously been under covers for a couple of days. So, and it was low scoring, but we scraped a win right at the end of the day. It was, yeah.
And to keep on the Middlesex theme, it would be great to get your thoughts on Wilf Slack and the great partnership you formed with him during the 80s. And of course, then his tragic early death at the age of 34.
Yeah. I still feel quite sad about, Slacky having gone so early. For someone who came from the Caribbean, he and his sister came when they were about 13 and 14, I think. So they were very close. And it took me a long time to realize that actually he was a real gentleman. He was very religious. I think towards the end of my career, I tended to listen to him, and we'd have some pretty intense discussions about the more serious things of life. We roomed together. So we roomed together and we opened the batting. So it was always actually something to look forward to. You could share everything with Wilf. He would take it on board, and he would come up with something, but he always used to take his time, didn't rush into anything. And he could play, certainly in terms of first cricket, he's one of the best players of quick bowling that I saw. He used to play Sylvester Clarke with a stick of rhubarb. It used to drive me bonkers because I was all over the place, and half the time I was waiting to get hit on the helmet or somewhere, And Slacky used to deal with it very well. There was one occasion when we played Gloucester. We won the toss at Bristol and we batted. And it wasn't a bad wicket, but they had Courtney Walsh at one end and Sid Lawrence at the other. And Sid opened the bowling. And I always used to take the first ball. And Sid opened the bowling. And in the first over, he bowled 7 wides. And the last ball, it just clipped my helmet. And what he'd done, he'd gone one side, other side, short, full. But it was quick. He steamed in. And I thought to myself, listen, no, I'll tell you, this bloke is dangerous, because he hasn't got a clue where it's going, and I've got even less idea. So at the end of the over, I walked down to the wicket. I said, Slacky, look, mate, I'll take Courtney, all right? He's a test bowler. I'll take Courtney. You take Sid. So he said, yeah, okay, it's all right,
And then he had these blackouts, didn't he, when he was playing?
Yeah.
So how difficult was that to see? And how often did that happen?
Well, actually, to be honest, I think the first time it happened, I'd stopped playing. I heard about it. I went straight to South Africa. The season that I stopped playing when I didn't play, I played for about a month, I think. As far as I remember, I don't think there had been any sort of incident. But as soon as I'd stopped, it was either later that season or beginning of the next. And it's another regret I have in my old age that for a number of personalities or people that I played with, I didn't go out of my way like I should have done to keep in touch with them. And that's quite, so, and Slacky was certainly one of them because he's probably the one that I was closest to, I mean, he came round the day before we left, brought us a present and, everything but a real gentleman, he would always think the best of anybody, that he came across.
Yeah, a really sad story, but that's lovely to hear your memories of, Wilf. Returning to the cricket, England, did you ever think you might be recalled? I'm thinking of 83 kind of time. You scored 1,519 runs with 400s. You're in pretty good nick. Did you ever think, I might get another chance here?
Yeah. I suppose. What about 85? When did I get the 600s in 7 games? Was that 85? Yeah. I mean, I thought then I would have an outside chance, because, I remember Embers told me, Embers was playing Test cricket at the time, and he said, back at me, he said, every time we turn the telly on, different game, you got another 100. I just remember that, but I suppose it entered my mind then. Yeah.
And so 1985, was that your last full season?
Yes. I'd begun to feel that I didn't, apart from opening the batting, I didn't really fit. I think I was changing quite a bit. I mean, I had a bit of a back problem. I had an auntie who did a bit. My auntie Josie lived in where we came from, New Romney. She did quite a bit of healing in her middle age. She used to give me some healing treatment when I went down to see them. That was one place that I always went. Whenever we had a break in the season, I always went down to New Romney. And Dungeness for me is probably the place where I'd like my ashes scattered if anyone can get there through COVID. It's the largest land mass of shingle in the world, apart from Cape Canaveral. It actually houses a power station, but the rest of it is just flat with tarred fishermen's cottages built on the shingle with thin cement roads all the way through it. And it's got 2 lighthouses. There's no silence there because with the channel being there, you hear the stones rush in and rush back, and the sound it makes it's a sort of a whoosh and a crash. It's always been quite a special place for me. I suppose you could call it, in some way, you could maybe call it a spiritual sort of place. So I always used to go back there. So, Josie's healing sort of fitted with it at that stage. So
are you quite spiritual now? You talk.
I'm very. I think I'm a very different person from when I played cricket. Thank God.
Yeah.
I'm a very big fan of Carl Jung. I've read a lot of Jung and Joseph Campbell, particularly. Yeah, and I read a lot. One of the reasons why I became an English teacher when I was playing cricket. But I'm very much into the novel area where people have overcome setbacks of whatever sort, post-traumatic stress stuff and alcoholism. And my wife deals in kids with learning difficulties, so autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia, all those type of things, And maybe throw a bit of crime in, and then I'm sold on it. I'll be entertained.
Yeah. I can only say thank you again for your time and your superb memories.
Thanks very much, Graham.
Excellent.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it.
Graham Barlow, everyone. A big thank you to him again for speaking to me from Australia. Thoroughly enjoyable company, and I hope you enjoyed hearing about his fascinating journey from those humble origins in Stockwell to the Sunshine Coast in Australia, with the odd car crash along the way. There simply wasn't the time and space to include all of Graham's stories and anecdotes, so I'll share some of these clips on the website, onceuponatimeintheashes.com, and on Twitter at onceashes. There's plenty more about his Middlesex teammates, including Wayne Daniel, Mike Selvey, Simon Hughes and Alan Jones, plus more on his time playing in Australia for St Kilda. Mick Malone is just getting into his run-up, and he will join us on the next episode for the Australian take on 1977 and World Series cricket. Another episode not to be missed. Until then, I've been Graham Barrett, and this has been Once Upon a Time in the Ashes.